again. So welcome back to Cafe Oleh. My name is Jay. I'm a volunteer with Nefesh B'Nefesh. I myself made Aliyah with Nefesh B'Nefesh just over 15 years ago, and I was only in a few seconds of my normal spiel, so here it goes again. For those of you who are new or forgotten, here at Nefesh B'Nefesh, we go over Cafe Oleh, sorry. We go over the everyday Hebrew you need here in Israel to succeed, whether that's paying bills, going grocery shopping, reading nutrition labels, following the news, conducting everyday conversations, whatever it may be, all the everyday communications that you're used to in your native language in your country of origin, but now in Israel as full-time Israeli citizens. As always, we want to make this user focused. So any topics you have, any topics you want us to cover that we haven't covered already, please write into Nefesh B'Nefesh. You can also write in the chat window here if you have any questions about that or any questions in general about Nefesh B'Nefesh and Cafe Oleh. Quick housekeeping, apologies, last week's session on healthcare and health terms in medicine was just uploaded the last few hours because of some personal issues our webmaster had with regards to the pandemic. Apologies for that, is now up there. I see quite a lot of people in the chat asking about the vocabulary. You can watch that lesson, screenshot to your heart's delight all the vocabulary list from that class. We do not send out the vocabulary list as a separate document here at Cafe Oleh, but you are welcome when I'm showing the vocab here live or on YouTube to screenshot old school pen and paper, just like you did in school when there weren't camcorders and recorders of allowed, let alone available in classrooms. That being said, all our previous lessons are up on Nefesh B'Nefesh's YouTube channel. Simply go to youtube.com, type in Cafe Oleh, type in Nefesh B'Nefesh. You will see a playlist of all of our previous lessons. And you will be able to follow along. You can follow this one. You can watch it over and over again. You can watch previous ones. You can opt out in the middle of this one because you have something else to do and come back to it, whatever you would like. Those of you, I see quite a number of people in the chat. I'll say it once again. If you want to follow along with the vocabulary from last week's session and any other previous session, just go onto youtube.com. You can pause the video just as you see those words come up. Write it out, pen and paper, screenshot it. They're all yours to use in that respect. Right, let's get to today's class. Also, sorry, one other very important piece of information, because there are currently 233 of you on this call. That is amazing. Don't let anyone tell you that people aren't interested in learning Hebrew, especially Jews interested in making Aliyah or already have made Aliyah. 235 of you. Amazing. Tell your family and friends we have lots more space here at Cafe Oleh on Zoom. That being said, there are 235 of you and just one of me. So if you have any questions about this specific topic we're about to start, please write that in the Q&A and only the Q&A. If you have questions about anything else, please write it in the chat window, right? You see in the Zoom menu bar that's in front of your screen, Q&A and chat. Q&A is just for this class. Chat is not for this class. If you write a question about this lesson that we're about to start in the chat, I'm not going to cover it. Even if we have time at the end, just out of spite. No, I'm kidding. Please write in the Q&A. It's much easier for me. It's very easy for me to organize it as such. So let's get started. Today, we're going to talk about everyday expressions and idioms. This isn't quite slang and it's not quite formal Hebrew. It's everyday conversation. And as I was compiling this list of expressions and idioms and asking friends and colleagues, I realized how few of them I had learned in formal education in Hebrew. I've had quite a lot of formal education in Hebrew, but a lot of these I had to learn on the ground in Israel, breaking my own teeth in learning the language and how to actually use it rather than learning it from a book or learning it from a tape or from textbooks that are 20 years old. So a lot of these you may have heard already. A lot of these you've probably never heard before. A lot of these you thought meant one thing, but I'm actually going to give you an additional definition to them. These are everyday expressions that I guarantee at least a third of them you're going to hear in any given day in Israel, maybe even more than a third, but they're really, really invaluable, no matter what level of Hebrew you're at. Even if you're at the most rudimentary beginner's level, these will really set you apart if you can just sprinkle these in while you're talking. You will turn quite a lot of heads of native Hebrew speakers. And as such, there may be fewer words this week. We're going to do other lessons on everyday expressions and idioms in the future, but I've come up with some sample sentences for each of them so you can hear how they're used in an everyday situation, or perhaps not an everyday based on what I came up with. So without further ado, let's get started. Let me open up the vocab list for today and we can get going. All right, hold on just a second. Where are you all? There you are. There we go. Okay, so as always, Hebrew is in the center of the screen. Transliteration is going to be on the right-hand side. English is going to be on the left. I'm going to explain everything as we go along. It's not just a straight vocab list, which is also why we don't send this to you. So let's get started. So, like I said, everyday expressions, everyday idioms, all sorts of different things that we use in Hebrew all the time. Some of this may sound a little bit more, how shall we say, gritty or earthy than you're used to speaking, but remember this is Israel. Israel doesn't adhere to necessarily where you're coming from, especially if you're coming from a native English speaking country. This is a different environment. You may have been in Israel 20 times before you made Aliyah. It's a different beast. It's a different dimension altogether when you are a full-time Israeli here. So with that, some of these are going to be a little brusque. That's how we do things here. Let's start with the first one, Ein li musag. Ein li musag is a really good term. It is actual Hebrew. It's not an idiom. This is stronger than saying ani lo yodea. In modern Hebrew, if I want to say I don't know, I can simply say ani lo yodea. Yodea means knows or know, K-N-O-W. Ani lo yodea, I don't know. A woman would say ani lo yodaat. Ein li musag is not that. Ein li musag is turning it up a notch and to say it's not I don't know, it's I don't have a clue. Or I may not know, or I may know, but I really could care less about telling you. So when someone says Ein li musag, they're really saying like, I really don't know. I have no idea. I have no clue. Okay, so no clue, no idea are the best ways to say this. If you want to conjugate this, and you can, it's not just about me like, Ein lo musag, he has no idea. She has no idea, Ein la musag, right? So as you hear, it's that second word in this expression, li, in this case, which is the indirect object to me, literally it means to me in English, that's going to conjugate based on who is speaking, who is the subject of the sentence. So if I'm saying, I have no idea what day it is, אין לי מושג מה התאריך היום. I have no idea what the date is today, right? It's about me. I have no idea, or I have no clue. If I was saying to someone else very forcefully, אין לך מושג מה התאריך היום. You have no idea what the date is today, right? If I was complaining to someone about they're behind on work or they're acting out of season, right? So I would change the li, which otherwise means to me, to lecha to a man, lach to a woman. Okay, I have no idea. That's our first expression. And we're going to actually combine a bunch of these into one sample sentence to make it even easier to understand how these are used again and again in everyday conversation. This next word, row 3, is one of the most important words. If you're not going to pay attention to me the rest of this hour, this is the word I would want to push you to use more and more as Hebrew learning the language, is stam. Stam is such an important word in modern Hebrew and in Israeli society. In the dictionary, as it says here on the left, it translates to mere or just. And then oftentimes it will translate to stam, to mere or just. But stam means so much more. Stam really can mean everything about the very popular 1990s slang word psych, or just kidding, or I was merely asking in a much more meek way. Stam can mean all sorts of different things at once, and it's used all the time. Okay, so here's a sample sentence, row 4, or it's actually an interaction between two people. And the setup is that someone is asking, as you'll see in the English and soon in the Hebrew, about some mutual friends or maybe a colleague. So here's how it would go. אין לי מושג מתי יחזרו מהחופשה. למה אתה שואל? Okay, let me read that as I would normal pace. I just read that slowly. I'm going to read it at a faster pace as I would say it. אין לי מושג מתי יחזרו מהחופשה. למה אתה שואל? And then the answer, the other person in this conversation would be סתם, מזמן לא שמעתי מהם. I would say, סתם, מזמן לא שמעתי מהם. Okay, so altogether, what are we trying to say here? As you see here in the English on the left, I have no idea, אין לי מושג, מתי יחזרו מהחופשה. I have no idea when they will return from vacation, right? So it's implied we're replying to a question about the whereabouts of friends or colleagues or family members. I have no idea when they'll return from vacation. Now, it could mean that the person who's saying אין לי מושג just couldn't be bothered to ask or to answer this question, or has been sworn not to answer it or to divulge it, right? But the point is they are saying quite emphatically, I really have no idea. I am the wrong address for this question. It's not just I don't know, I have no idea, no clue. Okay. Lama tashuel, why do you ask? Why are you asking? Right. So it's implied there's a previous question in this conversation, which was, where are so and so? And then the answer is stam mizman lo shamati mem. So that word stam, and we're going to try to translate it together in a second. Mizman lo shamati mem. I haven't heard from them for a while. Mizman means for a while. In Hebrew, it can come at the beginning of the sentence or at the end of a sentence, in this or the phrase, like it is here. Lo shamati mihem. I didn't hear from them. Okay, so the person is trying to inquire, you know, how long are they going to be away? I haven't heard from them. Asked someone else. They said they have no clue. Why are you asking? Stam mizman lo shamati mihem. No reason I put here. Okay, or as I put here in parentheses, or I just haven't heard from them in a while. Either way, stam is the right word to use here, because I wouldn't just say mizman lo shamati mem. It's a little too declarative. It's a little too speaking in a vacuum to say lo mizman lo shamati mem. Stam is more like it's clear when someone is using ein li musag, they're a little annoyed with this question. Why are you asking about these people? Why aren't you leaving them alone? They're on vacation. This person saying stam, like it's all in good intentions. I just haven't heard from them in a while, right? It's not trying to be too intrusive, even if they are being intrusive. Stam is a little bit of a polite way to back off, or to say, I'm just kidding, like I said before, right? Stam is take it easy, or don't take things too seriously, or no harm intended is another way of thinking about stam. But we use it again and again and again, whether someone's being sarcastic and wants to take it back, or if they're being a little too forceful and realize maybe they pushed too far, or they're joking around and they want to make it clear it's a joke and not being nasty. Stam is a really important word that we use a lot. Here's another iteration of stam, and this one is used just as much. Row 5, min hastam. Min hastam, when you use these two words together, means obviously or probably, or likely, sometimes even apparently. So it's the continuation of that conversation we were just hearing about. Like, why do you want to know where these people are? And he says, sorry, just one second. And he says, the first person talking, מן הסתם הם לא בודקים הודעות. ככה זה בחופשה. I'm going to say that again slowly and then say it again how I would. מן הסתם הם לא בודקים הודעות. ככה זה בחופשה. Row 6 here. Okay, if I was saying this, I would say, מן הסתם הם לא בודקים הודעות. ככה זה בחופשה. Okay, so, and then the answer, the other person who is inquiring about where these people are, says, מן הסתם כן. Okay, min hastam ken. So, min hastam hem lo bodkim hodaot. Min hastam, obviously or probably, hem lo bodkim hodaot. They are not checking their messages. Right? WhatsApp, SMS, voicemail, emails, all kinds of messaging is included in the word hodaot, which simply means messages. Okay? Minastam hem lo bodkim hodaot. They're likely not checking messages. Kacha ze bechufsha. That's how it is, or such as it is, or that's life on vacation. Kacha ze, by the way, is also a really good expression that we use quite a lot. But this is all to say, minastam is in all likelihood. That's probably the fanciest way to translate it, but it really means obviously, probably, apparently, most likely. All of those different ways is minastam. And as you see, the reply is minastam ken, right? The other person could easily just reply minastam. If you're replying to someone when it comes to in all likelihood or obviously, and you just want to say that like you would in English, you could just say minastam. Really good expression, stam, mina stam, and of course, eni musag that we had before. Okay, so let's go to this one. These are two really good ones. One of them is more of a sound, but it's an important sound to make in Israel. We have to do a little bit of cultural translation when we move from one country to another in terms of the filler sounds or onomatopoeia sounds or anything along those lines. So let's start with the first one, manisgal. Manisgal is a great expression. Manisgal is not translatable literally. Nisgal is the passive form of the verb to close. So nisgal is closed, both as a verb and as a participle. Ma, of course, means what. But manisgal means what, as I wrote here on the left, either WTF, look that up if you don't know what that means in 2022, or what's wrong with you. But it's a more enforceful than what's wrong with you. It's really what the hell's wrong with you. Manisgal. There's actually a TV show, I think it's still on channel 13 called Manisgal. And it's a roundup of the week's bloopers or unfortunate moments caught on TV and on the internet. And it's quite funny, right? It's making fun of people like Manisgal, what's wrong with you? What was up with you at that moment? It's a great thing to say to someone if you are upset. If I want to direct it specifically to someone, let's say I was speaking to a guy and I want to say, what the hell's wrong with you? I would say, manisgal itcha. What's wrong with you? Itcha means with you to a man, itach to a woman, and so forth. You can look up all those words, by the way, in a dictionary in terms of how to say with and then directly to someone. So manis, you could also say manisgal im, right? If you wanted to practice, I haven't watched Seinfeld with Hebrew subtitles on Netflix, but one of the ways that he does all his stand-up comedian, like, what's the deal with blah, blah, blah. One of the ways you could translate what's the deal with is manisgal im, and you fill it in. Okay, so manisgal is a really good one to have. The next one you've probably heard before. It's an important one to have if you've never heard it before. And if you have, just know this is how we say it, is oof. Oof is the equivalent of ugh, but it's really oof. Oof is a great non-wordless, wordless thing to say when you are upset, or you are surprised, or you are frustrated, or you are angry, or you're just caught up in a moment and you can't find the words for it. Oof is a great thing to put in your vocabulary. It is universally understood here in Israel. It's a clear expression of emotion, usually, like I said, frustration, surprise, bewilderment, frustration, all those different things. So I've combined these two together. I think this sample sentence will be relevant to probably some of you in some part of your life, maybe recent more than others. I'm going to read it slowly, and then I'm going to read it how I would say this out loud. I'm usually the recipient of this, but nonetheless. Oof, אני לא מאמין שהכלים עדיין בכיור. אחרי שהבטחת לשטוף אותם. מה נסגר איתך? Okay. This is not how I would ever say that. That is not how you would say a sentence like this. It would go something more like this. אוף, אני לא מאמין שהכלים עדיין בכיור, אחרי שהבטחת לשטוף אותם. מה נסגר איתך? Okay, so all of a sudden you hear a little bit more, as we say, pilpel, a little bit more pepper in that, because again, that's how we talk here in Israel. And you can hear how the oof is really part of that, starting that frustration, building it up, and finding the words to show why the person who's speaking is frustrated. Ugh, I can't believe that the dishes are still in the sink after I asked you to clean them. What's wrong with you? Obviously, I PG'd that up a little bit instead of manisgal. It can be translated a little bit more brusquely than what's wrong with you, but you get the idea here. Uf, ani lo ma'amin sha'kelim adayin bakiyur. Uf, ugh, I cannot believe, ani lo ma'amin, I cannot believe, or I don't believe, sheha-kelim, that the dishes, adayin bakiyur, are still, adayin is still, bakiyur, in the sink. אחרי שהבטחת לשטוף אותם. After, אחרי, שהבטחת, that you promised in the past, לשטוף אותם, to wash them. By the way, if you wanted to know how to say to wash dishes, לשטוף כלים. לשטוף is the verb, to wash in this case, כלים are dishes. אותם, meaning dishes. מה נסגר איתך? What's wrong with you? Okay, great sentence. I'm sure some of you are going to, again, have used this, will use this. Very important, but I'm saying everyday communication, manisgar is great. By the way, if you can't hear the resh, that's perfectly understood. I have a little bit of decongestant, congestion right now, that's the word. It would be manisgar, or if you can't say the letter resh, it's nisgar. Okay, the letter resh. So resh, resh, or resh are all acceptable ways to pronounce it. Manisgar or manisgar. Okay, let's get to the next one. Number 10, lom shane. Lom shane can mean it's not important, but it really means it doesn't matter. Mishane comes from the verb lishanot, which is to change, right? So it's more literally saying this doesn't change anything, or your action or lack of doesn't change anything. Lom shane is more like it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter, you don't use lom shane and mean lom shane. Lom shane is one of the many ways in modern Hebrew we can communicate passive aggressiveness. Okay, as you see in this very passive aggressive sample sentence, row 11. לא משנה, תעשה מה שבא לך. לא משנה, תעשה מה שבא לך. לא משנה, doesn't matter. תעשה מה שבא לך. Do, תעשה. מה, what, שבא לך. We had this several weeks ago, if not in the previous season, when it came to slang. Bali means what I feel like doing, or I feel like, or I want, or I love. In this case, I'm speaking to someone else. Lom shane. Ta'aseh ma sheba lecha. I'm speaking to a man in this case, because ta'aseh and balecha are both conjugated for masculine, second person singular. You. Lom shane doesn't matter, or don't worry about it. Ta'aseh ma sheba lecha. Do whatever you want. Not the most helpful of replies to probably not so helpful of an initial start to a conversation. But the point is, lom shane, we use quite a lot. It's, in this case, it's very passive aggressive. If you genuinely don't care in the choice between where to go for dinner tonight or anything in those lines, you can still use lom shane, but it still will indicate you probably do care, you just don't want to ruffle feathers, or it's not genuine necessarily when you say lom shane, meaning I don't care or doesn't matter, because I'm not even using the translation here, I don't care. It's more, it doesn't matter, which isn't, again, the most direct types of conversation. Here's an important one. This one, again, I would have only learned in conversation. Okay, this one is by far one of the most important ones to nail. And we talked about this a few weeks ago when we talked about introductions to conversations. And I said specifically that between all the different ways to introduce yourself and to ask how someone is doing, this one is probably the most problematic, and here's why. Manishma, right? When we first get taught Hebrew and we're taught to introduce ourselves and to ask how someone else is doing, we're taught that mashlumcha and mashlumech are the most formal and polite ways to introduce oneself. And they are, 100% they are. And by extension, because they're so formal, they're very nice. Then we have a whole bunch of other ones. Ma koreh, ma inyanim, ma chadash, ma koreh, like all these other ones. And we're told these are more slang or more familiar. I would say those are also very nice because they're slang. They're trying to find out what's going on with someone and they're being a little bit more genuine. This one we're often taught is the most common way to say, how are you doing? This is probably with the most fraught ways to do it. Manishma. Manishma, we normally get told is, how's it going? Or how are you doing? It's more what's up in a passive aggressive way. Like, I'm really angry at you. And I'm going to start this conversation by being polite because I'm still trying to be polite. I'm not going to lose my temper all at once because maybe I want to draw it out. Maybe I'm still finding the words because I'm so angry. Maybe I'm just very frustrated and I'm still at lack. So I'm going to say manishma and I'm going to start that conversation. Again, very important. This isn't going to be in every situation. Just like all of these, and I see quite a number of people in the Q&A asking, are these relevant for business meetings or no? No. Listen to what I said at the beginning of this lesson. This is everyday communication, not in a lawyer's office, not in the doctor's office, everyday communication. That could be those things. It could also be at the grocery store. It could be with a loved one. It could be with a significant other. It could be with a total stranger. Every day is all different scenarios, and I'm specifying when they are. Manishma, you need to be careful when you use it and when it's said to you, because if sometimes it's used in a very bland way. Think tofu, it's very bland. It doesn't have any flavor to it. It's just someone asking because they have to. And then sometimes manishma can really be passive aggressive. And they're asking because they're really angry and they want to give you a few seconds before they really lay it into you, like you see in this question. manishma, איפה היית הבוקר? חשבתי שקבענו להיפגש ב10. That's how I would say it. And I actually would say it in that tone and that forcefulness. Here's how, slow it down. Manishma, איפה היית הבוקר? חשבתי שקבענו להיפגש ב10. Okay, so what's up? Where were you this morning? איפה היית הבוקר? Where were you this morning? חשבתי, I thought, שקבענו, that we planned, להיפגש, to meet ב10, at 10 o'clock. Okay, so what's up? Where were you this morning? I thought we were going to meet up at 10. Right? So this is not being direct. Or if it is, it's doing it in a way that's still clear, like I'm angry. I'm not yelling at you quite yet. I'm giving you a slight window to both explain yourself, but also to lay it in like, you let me down. So manishma is a much more problematic expression than we're taught in ulpan, in Hebrew school, in day school, in yeshiva and university. That's what I'm trying to impart to you in this lesson today, folks, that these expressions are used every day. And because they're part of everyday vernacular, they change from what the textbook definition will often say. Manishma is a great example of that. Let's move on to row 14. Tageet or Tageedi. Tageet is for speaking to a man. Tageedi is to a woman or to male and female. Tageet at the beginning of a sentence can be just a regular way to get someone's attention, to understand that you're speaking directly to them. But Tageet is also another way of being telling someone off, or the start of telling someone off, or to be a bit more forceful in what you're about to say to them. Usually it's in the form of a question. Not always, but oftentimes there's a question involved. You're trying to get someone's attention. You want them to reply immediately to you. So there's a bit of urgency, at least on your side, when it comes to starting a conversation with Tageet. Likewise, if someone is talking to you and the sentence starts with Tageet or Tageedi, they're looking for an answer pretty fast. They're not looking for you to think about this. They're not thinking about your considerations, perhaps. Okay, so Tageed, יש מצב שתיקח את הכלב איתך למשרד היום? Row 15. תגיד, יש מצב שתיקח את הכלב איתך למשרד היום? Tell me, and the me is implied. You don't have to say, I just saw someone in the comments ask, do you need to say tagidli? You don't. When you're using it in this context, you don't have to say tagidli. You can. That's the normal way we're taught how to use this verb, to tell or say to me, right? Is lahagid li. In this case, you can just say tagid because it's understood who I'm speaking to, and it's understood who is speaking. When I say tagid, it is second person singular. So it's second person is you in English, by the way, if you didn't know, remember that in grammar. So if I'm saying tagid to a male and I'm looking right at them like I am in the camera, that's who I'm speaking to. If I said tagidi to a woman, it's clear I'm speaking right to her when I'm looking at her, or in the context of a conversation if I'm looking away. So the li is not necessary here, and it's more forceful, in fact, to say tagid or tagidi. This sample sentence happened to come up today, working out of the Nefesh B'Nefesh hub here in Tel Aviv. We had 3 dogs in the office today. It was quite the scene. So dogs were immediately on my mind as I was making up this lesson. But this is also a very Israeli, very Tel Aviv thing. Tel Aviv has one of the highest per capita dog ownerships in the world, and it is very common to bring dogs into the office, provided, of course, that they're well trained and so forth. But Tagid, יש מצב שתיקח את הכלב איתך למשרד היום? Tell me, is there a chance? יש מצב, we've talked about this in slang before. This is a classic slang expression. יש מצב, is there a chance, or there is a chance, or possibly, however you want to explain there is a chance. יש מצב שתיקח, that you will take, את הכלב, the dog, איתך, with you, למשרד, to the office, hayom, today. So tell me, is there a chance you can take the dog with you to the office today, right? Instead of leaving the dog at home, or the person who's talking to their place of work. תגיד, יש מצב שתיקח את הכלב איתך למשרד היום? Okay, this is speaking to a man because tagid and tikach are both conjugated for a male. If I was saying this to a woman, to a female, I would say tagidi. יש מצב שתיקחי את הכלב איתך למשרד היום? Right, so the things that change are tagid to tagidi, and tikach is tikchi. Okay, good sentence to have, also a very Tel Avivi, very Israeli thing to say. Takshiv. Takshiv sounds very similar to tagid in that we're getting someone's attention. This is perhaps even more forceful than tagid. Takshiv or takshivi, takshiv is to a male, takshivi to a female, comes from the verb lakshiv. Lakshiv is to pay attention or to listen, but it's to listen as in to pay attention. This is forceful, not just because it's to pay attention. This is a command that is taught very early on in basic training in Sahal, in the IDF, Hakshev, right? Pay attention to, it's usually Hakshev or Mifaked. Listen to, pay attention to your Mifaked, to your commander. So it comes with extra oomph to it. Let's say PTSD, or kept extra memory to it when you hear the verb lakshiv. It's really like, pay attention right now, not in 5 minutes from now or right now. So if you start a sentence with takshiv or takshivi, or someone starts that with you, they want your undivided attention right now. They actually wanted it 5 seconds ago, but they're giving you notice immediately. Takshiv or takshivi, listen, is a great way to translate it. Listen, or listen up, or pay attention. Really good expression. And here's another good expression. Lo mekubal. Lo mekubal or lo mekubal al, and then it's conjugated accordingly. Lo mekubal means it's unacceptable. Mekubal means acceptable. It comes from the verb lekabel, to receive or to get. Lo mekubal is the passive or past participle of lekabel. So lo mekubal is how we say it's unacceptable. Something is unacceptable to me. right? The rest of the sentence is going to elaborate what that is, or in the context of a conversation, we'll be able to understand what is not acceptable to the person speaking or to someone else. Okay. But the point is that lo mekubal is very is a sorry, just one second. I see something I messed up in. There we go. Lo mekubal is a really good expression to have under your belt. And you can say it in a couple different ways. You can say that something is pashut lo mekubal alai, as you're about to hear in the sample sentence. You can say it about to someone else. Lo mekubal alav sheigata beichur. It's not acceptable to him that you arrived late, right? You're speaking on behalf of someone else. Or that, that dish was simply unacceptable. המנה הזאת פשוט הייתה לא מקובלת. Okay, in which case the מקובל will conjugate, but it usually won't. And here's a great example of לא מקובל, like I just said before. תקשיב, לא מקובל עליי את מה שעשית בישיבה. תקשיב, listen, right? And again, takshiv, when you use it in this context, is really forceful. You're really getting this person's attention. And most of the time, I'm not going to say 100%, but 90% of the time, it's not going to be pleasant. It's not going to be positive. But life is not always positive or pleasant. You got to know also when to complain and how to complain. It's rather important, just like you do in English and in other languages. Takshiv, listen. Mash lo mekubal alai, it's not acceptable to me. Right? It's not acceptable unto me is oftentimes how you'll see it translated. That's a little too much. We don't talk like that in English. It's unacceptable unto me. It's unacceptable unto me. Et ma she'asita b'yeshiva. Et what you did in the yeshiva, in the meeting. Yeshiva is another way to say meeting. It does not mean automatically in modern Hebrew a yeshiva. Okay, remember the state of Israel has a lot of diversity to it. Not everyone here is in a yeshiva, have studied in yeshiva, will study in a yeshiva, and it's still called a yeshiva. But a yeshiva can also mean a meeting, like a work meeting, a scheduled meeting. And it usually is what it's called in the context of an office space. You're not going to call it a pkisha when you have a staff meeting. You're going to call it a yeshiva. You're actually going to call it a yeshivat tzevet. Tzevet is staff, yeshivat tzevet, a staff meeting. Okay, so takshiv, lo mekubal alai et ma she'asita b'yeshiva. I could also change the order of the sentence, by the way. And modern Hebrew is very flexible many times in the order of sentences. I could easily just say, takshiv, ma she'asita b'yeshiva lo haya mekubal alai. Okay, I didn't want to put the whole thing in the past. I wanted to use lo mekubal in this immediate context, but I could do that if I conjugate it for the past. Ma she'asita b'yeshiva, what you did in the meeting, lo haya mekubal alai, was not acceptable to me. You could also make that lo mekubal alai. The point though is, lo mekubal is a great expression to have if you're voicing an opinion, right? I'm talking right here, these are a bit aggressive perhaps, but let's say you're reading the news and you want to comment on the news with a friend or the state of affairs, and we're going to get to an example of that shortly. Lo mekubal is a way to express an opinion. This is simply unacceptable. And it could be all sorts of different things. It could be, again, current events, not just, you know, people's individual behavior. Okay. Im kol hakavod. Im kol hakavod veyesh kavod. A great expression. Just like in English, if you're going to say im kol hakavod, which in English means with all due respect, chances are you don't have respect for the person or the thing you're about to say. In Hebrew, we say im kol hakavod, and that translates very literally, and you'll hear this quite a lot. Okay, im kol hakavod, with all due respect, with all the respect, it literally translates to, right? Im kol hakavod v'yesh kavod. I added the v'yesh kavod because there's quite a number of Israeli sitcoms where the characters will say this line to really emphasize, oh yeah, with all due respect, and there is respect, but there really isn't respect. So they're really emphasizing how they're about to lay into the person, right? So im kol hakavod v'yesh kavod is a common Israeli expression to say, with all due respect. You can simply just say im kol hakavod. But understand, Im kol hakavod is with all due respect, and it usually does not mean you have respect. Kol hakavod means congratulations, good job. Okay, but im kol hakavod means with all due respect. Im means with. I mean, excuse me. Im with an aleph means if. Im with an ayin means with. Here it's im with an aleph means if. Okay, im kol hakavod. Okay. Ani lo sovel, ani lo sovelet. A great expression. I love this one quite a lot. Ani lo sovel, ani lo sovelet. I can't stand. This comes from the verb lisbol, which means to suffer. I remember hearing this one when I was working in retail as a graduate student in Jerusalem, and the other undergrad students who were working there would use this all the time to express an opinion. Not, I don't like something. It was, ani lo sovelet et ze. So it's not ani lo hevet kafe, it's ani lo sovelet kafe. So it's not enough to not like something. You really gotta not like it. I can't stand it. I can't suffer it, literally. Okay, so this one is quite strong, but it's a great way to really emphasize you do or don't like something. I can't stand it, just like you would in English. Okay, im kol hakavod, and I'm seeing that actually someone just corrected me, and thank you for that. Sorry, just 1 second, having a technical issue here. There we go. Okay, actually, I did make a mistake here, as it does happen. I spelled that wrong. It is im with an ayin, as in with, just like in English. So apologies for that, folks. I'm correcting it just as I'm talking. Im with a ayin, that does happen when I use an automatic nikud generator, the dots and bars that indicate vowel sounds. So it's im kol hakavod with an ayin, with all due respect. Im with an ayin means with. Here's the sample sentence. Im kol hakavod, ani pashut lo sovel otam. הם לא מפסיקים לדבר וגורמים לי כאב ראש כל פעם מחדש. Okay, just an illustrated way to use these two expressions. Say it again slowly and then how I would say it. עם כל הכבוד, אני פשוט לא סובל אותם. הם לא מפסיקים לדבר וגורמים לי כאב ראש כל פעם מחדש. I would say this as, עם כל הכבוד, ויש כבוד, אני פשוט לא סובל אותם. הם לא מפסיקים לדבר וגורמים לי כאב ראש כל פעם מחדש. Clearly, I don't like these people. What am I saying here? With all due respect, I simply can't stand those people. I can't stand them. So, otam is them. They don't stop talking, and they cause me a headache every time, or each time anew, however you want to say that. Im kol hakavod, with all due respect, I simply, ani pashut lo sovel otam, can't stand them. Hem lo mafsikim ledaber, they don't stop talking. Vegormim li, and cause me, ligrom is to cause. Ke'ev rosh, a headache. Kol pa mechadash, every time. Kol pa means every time. Mechadash means anew, right? So every time anew that I'm with them, they give me a headache. So I'm complaining about a friend's friends or complaining about colleagues, whatever it may be. But im kol hakavod and ani lo sovel, great expressions to have, and you're going to hear these, even if this isn't how you talk, right? I'm sure there's plenty of people here say, well, I never talk like this, and I'm just a positive person. Well, you're not going to say I'm a positive person. I would never say anything bad. Other people are around you. You don't use language in a vacuum. People do use these expressions all the time. So even if you're not going to, you should still understand what's being said around you. Again, another one that's a little strong, but it's a good one to have. Bilti nizbal. Bilti nizbal is a great, complicated grammatical construction, but means something probably a little bit less, which means intolerable or insufferable. Nizbal is that same root that we had before, right? With sovel. Now it's in the passive and it's preceded by bilti. Okay, these two words together, bilti nizbal. It's not sufferable, it's insufferable, it's intolerable. Bilti nizbal. And here's the sample sentence. Ahit nahagut hazo mamash bilti nisbelet. This behavior or that behavior, hitnagut is behavior, zot or zo can mean both this or that, feminine because hitnagut is feminine. Mamash is very, mamash is like meod, very, excuse me, bilti nisbelet, intolerable. Now you see, because the word is hitnagut, nisbal turns to nisbelet. It has to, it's an adjective. So it's going to agree with the noun that it's modifying. Okay, bilti nisbal, a great way to describe if something is intolerable or insufferable or I can't stand it. Bilti nisbal. You can even just say, זה פשוט בלתי נסבל. It's simply insufferable. It's simply intolerable. Great expression. Two more, and I want to take your questions as see we have a bunch of them. Bilti nimna, that same grammatical construct. I'm not going to get into it. It's more complicated just to understand the meaning because we use this one quite a lot as well. Bilti nisbal was intolerable. Bilti nimna is unavoidable. Nimna comes from the verb to prevent, limnoa. This is the passive form, and then it's further modified with bilti. So unavoidable, inevitable. It's only a matter of time. These are all ways to use bilti nimna. Okay. And the other expression we're going to use in the sample sentence is lelo safek. Lelo safek is also a great way to agree with someone. It's a great way to confirm what someone says, to further what they say. Lelo safek. Safek is a doubt, D-O-U-B-T. Lelo safek is without a doubt, or simply no doubt would be lelo safek. You could also say it in another way, ein safek, but we usually will hear lelo safek. Okay, so here's the sample sentence again, pulled from current events, unfortunately. First sentence, the beginning of it. Atem choshvim sheplishat harusim leUkraina hi bilti nimna'at? ללא ספק תהיה פלישה. העניין הוא אם תהיה מעורבות מהמערב או לא. Okay, so let's go through these sentences again. אתם חושבים, do you think, שפלישת הרוסים לאוקראינה, that the invasion of the Russians into Ukraine, היא בלתי נמנעת, is בלתי נמנעת, our word that we just had, is inevitable. Right? Bilti nimnat is conjugated because we're talking about plisha. Plisha is an invasion. Okay, so because invasion, plisha is feminine, bilti nimnat has to end in the ta, in the taf. So it's bilti nimnaat, inevitable but conjugated accordingly. And then the reply is lelo safek tia plisha. Okay, without a doubt, there will be an invasion. Okay, lelo safek, absolutely, without a doubt. All those different words, but it's a great way to confirm what someone says, to say yes instead of saying ken each time. You want to spice it up just like you do in English. You don't always answer yes to something that you agree with. You use other words like absolutely, definitely, without a doubt. Okay, so to sum up before I get to your questions, I know these were a lot of words. I know these sentences were also not easy. I specifically picked these sentences because I want you all to break your teeth on everyday Hebrew. I don't want you to be intimidated that you don't understand all the grammatical rules of Hebrew. Even native Hebrew speakers don't understand all the grammatical rules of Hebrew. I want you to be able to dive in and at the very least pick out some everyday expressions that you'll hear all the time. So even if you don't understand the whole sentence of Atem choshvim sheplishat harusim leUkraina hi bilti nimnat, you'll hear bilti nimna and you'll understand that's something about unavoidable or inevitable, because you'll know that expression because you'll hear it so many times, or bilti nisbal or ani lo sovel, or any of these other ones that we had today, because you are going to hear them. Even if you're going to tell me right now, I've never heard these before, I promise you, you're going to hear these. Not all of us live in the same community, have the same circumstances, but certainly living in Israel's second largest city, and before that in Israel's largest city in Jerusalem, I can guarantee you, you're going to hear these from all walks of life, younger, older, casual, formal, all sorts of different places, you're going to hear these expressions. Okay, I see a bunch of Q&As. Let's get through as many of these as I can right now. Does ein lanu change the musag? No, ein lanu musag, we have no idea. Musag in this first one that we had, ein li musag, musag will never change. Musag comes from the verb lahasig, to acquire. So something that is acquired is musag. So I have no knowledge, I have no recollection, I have no understanding is a literal way to translate it. Musag will never change. It's just who doesn't have an idea. Ein li musag, I have no idea. Ein lanu musag, we have no idea, and so forth. Shelley asks, is there another way of saying you're probably right in Hebrew without stam? There absolutely is. Min hastam is a great expression. There are many other ways to do it. Again, we're speaking about specific expressions here. There are other ways, more literal ways that you can look up in a dictionary and how to say you're probably right. But you're probably right. There aren't many ways to say probably without min hastam. There are ways to say you are right and you are correct, but probably is harder to communicate than any better than with min hastam. Manisgal is not a curse word. It is not impolite. It's very forceful. It's definitely not a curse word. I will give you all a heads up if there's going to be a curse word in Hebrew in our lessons, and I rarely do. Manisgal is very forceful language. I wouldn't call it formal language whatsoever. It's not. It is slang to an extent. It's very direct. As you heard, what's wrong with you? You're not going to use that in a very casual way. You're going to use that in a very forceful and direct way. Can manisgar be used politely? Absolutely not. Manisgar is very forceful. It's very forceful is the best way to answer that. Manisgar is very direct. You would not use this in a formal setting with complete strangers unless they really messed you up or screwed you over. Sorry for the expression there. This is not to say to someone who has not done something wrong to you or something wrong that they need to be accountable about. But it's not appropriate for a business type setting unless you're calling someone out on the carpet. You certainly wouldn't say this to an older person unless they happen to do something very mean to you before that. Richard asks, what do we lochet and what do we shotef? Great question. Lilchotz or litrachet has to do with your body. Shotef is usually objects. That's a very crude way to do it, but just know to wash dishes, lishtof kelim. You will wash other things, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. Go for it. Shelly says, my grandkids often say lo bali. You're right, Shelly, and we've talked about bali and lo bali before. It's a great expression to have. Anonymous, how does one respond to manyanim? I never know how to respond. Anonymous, remember a few weeks ago, and you can look this up on YouTube, we talked about introductory greetings. Machadash, manishma, mashlomcha. Manyanim is one of them, and it simply means what's up, what's new. And you can reply however you want. You can do a very Israeli thing and ask the other person again how they're doing. And you often do it in 3 or 4 rounds before you actually answer how you're doing. You can just answer how you're actually doing. Manyanim, ani betov toda, or hakol tov, everything's good, or I'm good, thanks. Okay. Marlene, talking about slang, I hear people say why as a response to something. It's not meant as a question. Could you explain? I hear people say why as a response to something. It is not meant as a question. I'm not sure how it's not a question. It's a very stereotypical but very true stereotype about Jews and Israelis answering a question with a question. So often you'll hear why, lama. I think you're meaning why as in why you've transliterated the word why. Okay, if that's the case, why is a bit like oof. It's a it's not a word, but it's a word. Why is like wow. Okay, that's probably the best way to say. If someone replies why, which is a very typical way to reply to something that you are happy or not happy about, it simply means wow. Why, wow. That's a good way to translate it, actually. Miriam asks, does mekubal always need to have al attached? It doesn't. You could simply say lo mekubal. זה פשוט לא מקובל. It's simply unacceptable. Let me pull up lo mekubal. Here it is. It does not, which is why al is in parentheses. If I want to specify, modify to whom or to what is unacceptable, I would have to use al, but it doesn't need to. Great question, Miriam. Ellen, after mekubal al, can you add an infinitive? E.g., to do this is unacceptable. Yep. לא מקובל עליי ללכת לישון עכשיו. It is not acceptable to me to go to bed right now. Now, I could also be talking to someone else, right? So using an infinitive doesn't specify to whom I'm speaking. I could say לא מקובל ללכת לישון עכשיו. It is not acceptable to go to bed right now. But I could be saying that to someone, or I could be saying that in general, or I could be saying that about myself. It's better to conjugate after it using the prefix she. לא מקובל עליי שתלך לישון עכשיו. It is not acceptable that you go to sleep right now. Or it's not acceptable to go to sleep right now, but it's clear I'm speaking to you specifically. If I just say לא מקובל ללכת לישון עכשיו, I could be in a general declarative statement saying it is not acceptable to go to bed right now. So if you want to specify, Ellen, you need to conjugate the verb, unfortunately, for those who have trouble with conjugating verbs. Why do we say lo mekubal et ma she'asita? Lo mekubal, yes, mekubal, Michael, great question. Lo mekubal is, he asks, is mekubal a verb? Mekubal is both a passive verb and it's also a past participle. And we've talked about participles before. They skirt the line between nouns, verbs, and adjectives all at once. They're really important in Hebrew. We use them all the time in English. We don't necessarily know what they are when we're using them, but lo mekubal is, in this case, it's a verb. So lo mekubal, it is not accepted onto me, okay? And in that sentence, it's et, because I'm referring to, that person is referring to a very specific thing that happened. Et is used before a definite object. So when you are specifying something, you'll use et. Okay. Tamar asks, in this sample sentence for 18, does the sentence also work without the word alai? Yes. Lo mekubal ma she'asita b'yeshiva lo mekubal, or lo mekubal et ma she'asita b'yeshiva. Yeah. That would actually be more forceful, Tamar. Like I just said to in the other question to Ellen, because alai is that it wasn't acceptable to me. Who am I? I could be the boss. I could be a colleague. I could be someone even lower down in the corporate ladder. But if I just said lo mekubal et ma she'asita b'yeshiva, that is a declarative statement that in general, what you did was unacceptable in that meeting. That's a much more forceful way to say things, right? It's not about me anymore. It's about all of us. It's in general, in the world, what you did was unacceptable. So yes, Tamal, you could say it. It just is even more forceful. Great question. Other questions? We have only a few more minutes. Heather asks, why can you explain why it's hazo instead of hazot with hitnagut? It's more complicated to explain. Just know that hazo or hazot are both okay. They both mean the same thing, which is this or that for feminine. Okay, we have a lot of repetitive questions here in the Q&A, but that's okay. So we're going to break here We have a lot of people in the chat, so I'm really excited for all the people who, as I'm quickly seeing again, bless you all for writing in both the Q&A and chat. Thank you all for writing questions in the Q&A. If you wrote in the chat questions about this lesson, I'm sorry, I'm not going to get to it. I said at the beginning, please write that in the Q&A. Those of you who wrote in the Q&A, thank you for your questions. I see more coming in, but we do need to stop right here. So again, toda rabah, thank you all so much for joining tonight. I know this was a hard lesson, but it's important to break your teeth a little bit, as we say. You will get a copy of this lesson on YouTube in the next few days. So you can subscribe to Nefesh B'Nefesh's channel. You can watch it there. And you will be able to watch this on repeat. So if you came late, if you need to step out, if you want to go a little bit slower, if you want to see where I needed to correct myself throughout it and laugh a little bit, or however you would like, by all means, that lesson will be there, as well as all our previous ones. Next week, we'll be back, same time, same place. Next week, we are doing probably the most, I'm not going to say hated, but the most feared topic of non-native Hebrew speakers, and particularly of native English speakers that there is in Hebrew. This is probably one of the top 3. And so I hope you will all join us next week. We are talking next week numbers. And if you think that's easy, you have no idea how you actually use numbers in Hebrew. And if you do, I promise I will make it as easy as possible. You will understand how to use numbers next week, 8 o'clock Israel time. See you all next week. Toda rabah, lihitraot. See you all very soon.